saying that there's something wrong with your heart, and then you have a heart attack, and
before you do anything preventative. And certainly even in, and as you know, and as a lot of folks understand who are in this area of concern and advocacy and research, individuals who have a mental illness are much more likely to be victims than they are to be the perpetrators. But not unlike the bad attorney jokes that I've had to put up with for years, it's the ones who screw up, the ones that end in tragedy, that get all the attention, and everybody gets painted with that broad stroke, with that broad brush.
That's right.
Yeah.
And even to go on that, as you know, this, let's call it the mental health landscape, right? Everybody's got different terms, and after that tragedy, I knew she needed help, not prison. And I learned during that time, too, that my sister is SMI, for those severely mentally ill, which make up about 4% of the population. And, the SMI is very different. My sister fell through the cracks. I'm not blaming the facilities or anything that. I'm blaming the system and the fact that there's no information out there, so thus we decided we had to do something.
And before we move on, let me just pause you there, and I apologize for the interruption. I just want to make this point and not seem remiss or insensitive. First of all, I am sorry for your loss, your sister, and having to go through that in your family. I can't imagine. And I'm also very sorry for the loss of the person whose life she took in that family. I don't mean to be, and I know that you don't mean to be, insensitive or dismissive of that loss of life.
Not at all. And, I just talk about it a lot. And interestingly enough, the victim's family were not upset with us. They blamed the system. They saw it too. They said, your sister wouldn't have done this had she been properly cared for.
Yeah. Well, that's huge of them.
It's huge, and it's huge. Rare.
It is. It is.
But her case was that clear cut, and I actually, I was the one that did all the hiring of lawyers and everything, because my parents, they couldn't, with that kind of trauma, they weren't really normal for a year, and able to kind of function daily tasks, which, as we know, is a side effect of trauma,
Yeah, big time. Big time.
But I was thinking about actually quitting film and writing a book about our country's mental health system and flow and problems, using my sister's story as a through line. And fortunately, the good friend and woman I was dating at the time said, "Hey, dummy, don't you make documentary films?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that is what we do."
Funny you should mention that.
But when you're in that trauma and you can't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
But so that was it, and I said, "You're right. That's what we need to use, the medium that I've been working in for all these years." And Harry and I met, and we knew absolutely that we had to do something. We didn't know what it was yet, but we were buzzing with the energy of knowing that this is the right thing to do. And Harry likes to say that it's like the film and the project found us. We both had mental health tragedies in our family. We've got years and years of highest level film distribution and experience. And our kind of specialty is featuring subjects to global audiences that are either little known or misunderstood. It fit everything.
And I have to tell you, again, I want folks to go to this site. And if you're just tuning in, I am talking to Jeff Fraley. He is the co-founder, executive producer of the Mental Health Channel.
The world's first online channel dedicated to mental health programming.
mentalhealthchannel.tv, and it is beautiful, man. I got to tell you, and again, I'm not just saying this because I like the channel and I love what you're doing, and we have common cause, certainly, on several different fronts.
Sure.
But it is beautiful. It is elegant, and it's so... efficient's not the right word, but because they're so short, you can get in and get out and really get the substance. It doesn't lose anything for the brevity.
That's right. And, part of that is doing our own research. And, again, to what this started out as, we finally determined was a PBS miniseries. We've done a national PBS miniseries. And we've done a lot of work with PBS in the past. This is, end of 2009 where we think we're going down that road. Because even in 2009, James, in my industry, in my medium, documentary production, and for broadcast specifically, the holy grail has been miniseries,
Yeah.
But we realized that that's changing. And as we all know, everything's migrating to a digital platform. Television, as we grew up with, does not exist. There is no set broadcast time. As you know, I'm dating myself a little bit, but if you wanted to watch Cheers, you sat down at Thursday at 8.
That's right. That's right. And thank you very much, that was one of my favorite shows.
You see, we were watching, the whole country was watching together. That's why it was like one big love fest.
Yeah.
But that is how those massive finale shows got the numbers, because television is still king. It's changing completely, particularly with the younger generations, the Generations Y, Generation Z. They don't own televisions. They have monitors.
They have devices.
or an iPad or a mini, right?
Yeah.
And so what we found is that, well, first of all, the web is the biggest distribution arm ever built in mankind. I mean, this is the biggest platform we get today. There's going to be something else somewhere, somehow, but this is the, great connector. But what it's done, though, too, is it's changed our consumption of media. And in doing so, it has shortened attention span. Now, that's a whole other podcast we can rail on.
Right, yeah, big time.
The American attention span.
My kids is what we're talking about, but anyway.
I know. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to sound like this old man complaining about technology.
Back in my day.
No, for the exact reason of its penetration capability, and to get the younger generation. And so, switching online, and our researchers, our brilliant coders, our web designers, we did research first on traffic that mental health websites get and the average attention viewing span of video on the web. We found that the average attention span on the web for video is 4.5 minutes.
I've heard those numbers.
Yeah, and also because and you mentioned production quality. That's one of our identifiers, because that keeps eyes on a page. YouTube in some ways is almost a victim of its own success. It's what brought us Dancing Kittens and Charlie Bit My Finger.
Charlie Bit My Finger is a darn good YouTube. I love that.
There's no question. My dog's name's Charlie. but this is, where it's going. This is where all TV is headed. Yeah. And the story really was, I was speaking. The University of Texas Arlington invited me to come speak at this entrepreneurship in the arts seminar, which is great because it's all kind of the business back end of all artistic mediums, which I'm happy to do, because people think at film school, or what we do as filmmakers sometimes, they have a fantasy that we sit around in black turtlenecks and discuss the merits of German cinema over some Cuban coffee or something.
Right, exactly. Well, we don't do that. We don't do that all the time.
Yeah. 90% of what we do is the business aspect of it. And we thought, but this model worked better anyway, because I was telling these kids back to the University of Texas about what film cost when I started and what it is now. To give you an example, in 1996, we had to buy 4 gigabytes of memory to complete the editing of our first film, and it was the size of a small dorm refrigerator, and it was $10,000. That's a giveaway at Office Depot now.
Exactly.
On a flash drive.
Exactly. It's amazing.
So my point is, this is there's an entire new generation that has more access to these kind of creative tools and the way they consume it, So, because what the web has done, for better or for worse, is it's allowed the individual to tailor their viewing experience in an unprecedented way, right? I mean, like we were just talking about the Cheers and the television. Maybe you had a VCR, and if you could figure out the menu, how to record something, you might be able to record
Which was
it.
horrifically difficult for some reason. You never could get it right.
Here I go. I have no idea. Yeah, it was awful. Yeah.
Back in my day. Okay, go ahead.
You'd end up watching some satellite feed of barcodes.
Exactly. So I want to hover on the point so people who are listening to this understand, lest we get too far down into the weeds of media stuff because we're having too much fun. Talk about what you mean.
You mean we can't geek out?
We can't. Yeah, we should. We can, but I'm gonna have to edit that part out anyway. But at the risk of getting too geeky about it, talk about what you mean when you say production quality and what that does for the Mental Health Channel as a whole, and in this space where there's so much stuff out there. I mean, YouTube, you can find anything. I mean, when I forget how to program my garage door opener, I go to YouTube. When I can't, everything you want is out there.
Oh yeah, you could learn how to take out a pancreas.
Don't say that. People are going to start doing that job.
My point is it's in the same, with the web being as big as it is, I think any viewer, consumer, audience member right now would agree that not all quality is consistent on the web, and that's a problem because people have less tolerance for beta-looking sites these days, or
things that are just sort of practice. People aren't up to snuff. You got to be better and better to get people to stay and watch you.
Yeah, and then there's scalability issues and all these other things, but fundamentally, high production value is something we've really, championed from every film we had, and try to maximize production value at every turn because, and not in the place of storytelling, but it's part of the whole component, just like any good film. It's got to be aesthetically, cinematic, visually pleasing. People like stories, right?
Yeah.
Stories teach us a lot. Comedy teaches us a lot,
Yeah, absolutely.
And we just thought that, we've got to keep this production value high because we want it to look like, we want it to be the HBO of the web for mental health channel, right? For mental health competent. Because what we discovered, and I apologize in advance, I'm going to offend anybody who's made a mental health film before, but send all
there goes half my listeners, Jeff. I can feel them leaving right now. Go ahead.
No, but what we found is most of it is a very poor quality, and most of it was as frightening as the illnesses themselves.
Ooh, yeah. That's true, though. I mean, a lot of it, it's too long. It's not very well edited. The stories aren't clean and concise and tight.
Right.
And what passes off for creativity.
The message.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So the content, we want consumers, viewers, people who care about anybody to say, that was a cool video, incredibly shot. And boy, did I learn something about mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also think there's nothing more powerful than letting others share their experience, strength, and hope. That's where change happens. We can. There are great clinicians, there are great counselors, there are great physicians, but we learn through story and image, basically, in many ways, right?
Absolutely.
So we thought this, and what's perfect about this delivery model and this platform is it's perfect for mental health because let me go back and make fun of myself on this. So we were going to do the mini series, and it was going to be six nights, 1 hour episodes for our nation, called "Mental Illness in America." How bad is that title?
That's pretty intense. Yeah. And we're going to have to leave it right there. Much more of my interview with Jeff Fraley. We'll upload that for the podcast. Look for the extended interview with Jeff. That's it for today's show. Thanks to Sinjin Barnett-Smith, Alana Rocha, and the incredibly talented staff at the Mental Health Channel online at mentalhealthchannel.tv. Jeff Fraley, thank you so much. Until next week, for Mindset, mental health news, and information, I'm your host, James Curtis. Dare to see mental health differently, because when we understand why we do what we do, we can all do better. See you next week.
One of the campaigns in the past was, there are millions suffering in silence. That's certainly true, but there are tens of millions more succeeding in silence. At its essence, the Mental Health Channel is a place for others to go and learn and connect and empathize as they learn from others who share their experience, their strength, and their hope. And hope is the key, James. That's what I like to say. Mental Health Channel is a hope peddler. And if you want to change policy, you got to change culture first. Kind of one of our